Good evening, all. Thank you so much for your patience. I do beg your pardon. We had real problems then kind of unmuting our speakers. So we had, as you always fear, you do all this preparation, all this rehearsal, and then you have that moment where you think, goodness, is the IT going to let us down? But we've got there. Good evening, all. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me start by introducing myself. I am not a technical expert, and I'm Elisabeth Davies, the chair of the Prisoners Education Trust Trustee Board. So it's very good to know that you're here this evening. Now, you might expect me to be starting by saying how disappointing it is that we're not meeting in person. And on one level, it is. But I'm very aware also that the fact that we're meeting remotely has made evenings like tonight possible. And it also means it's possible to record it so that others and those who aren't free on this particular Wednesday evening can access it. So that's what we're doing. We are recording the event this evening. So what's tonight about? Well, primarily it's a chance to listen in on a conversation with the people who are so central to PET, and those are our staff. In the last 18 months, PET staff have proved themselves to be adaptable, flexible, resilient. And hearing from them tonight gives you a chance to see what I get to see every day, and to above all bring life to just how PET gives people in prison the tools to transform their lives through learning. Now, what tonight is also about is the chance to tell you about the Big Give Christmas Challenge. We are taking part in the challenge this week, and it's where donations made to PET through the Big Give website will be doubled. And this year, your donations through the Big Give website will be very much around funding the work, which you're going to find out more about tonight. We've shared the link in the chat box, or we're going to be doing that, and we'll share it again at the end of the evening. So I'll come back to that as well. Let me tell you a little bit about how things will work this evening all. We've got just under an hour, haven't we, together? And I have a number of questions to put to PET staff on your behalf. Now, because there are so many of you, which is wonderful, we can't see you, but any comments should come via the chat room. So if there are themes or questions, I will try and spot these and put these to the panel later in the evening and on your behalf. 2 points I just wanted to share with that in mind then. The first is that if I spot themes and questions, and I'm mindful that actually the panel who we have with us tonight aren't the right people to answer your question, we do have John Collins, PET's Chief Executive, on standby. So we'll kind of make sure that we can come back to you if that's necessary. Second is just that kind of warning really, and we are starting a little bit later, aren't we, than planned. We may not have that much time for extra questions at the end, so we may just have to see. But either way, what I want you to take away from this evening is a very real sense of having been in conversation with PET staff. So if that's the plan for the evening all, let's start with some introductions. Now, I'm in this lovely position tonight of actually knowing who's here. I know that we have supporters here. We have academics, prison staff, trusts, foundations, prison charities, criminal justice organisations. You're all together in our virtual audience, and we're incredibly grateful that you've made the time to join us. But who will you be hearing from? Let's ask PET colleagues to introduce themselves. So Suzan, tell us what you do, and as importantly, why do you do it?
Thank you, Elisabeth. Good evening, everyone. My name is Suzan Nabbanja, and I am the Grants Manager, part of the Access to Learning team at PET. I have the great pleasure of being a witness to and playing a role in the growth of PET for over the last 18 years. My role is to effectively manage all aspects of the administration of the grants programme, playing a leading role in the decision-making process and the allocation of funds to successful applicants. I play a prominent role in managing our relationships with the staff in the prisons, and also work closely with our advice manager to promote our work and services to prison staff and prisoners. I also work closely with the advice manager and the head of service delivery in developing and maintaining effective partnerships with our course providers. Now, I have worked at PET, like I said, for just over 18 years. And why Well, because I passionately believe in the transformative power of ongoing learning, no matter your background, circumstances, or age. Every individual should have access to education. Also, I've had the privilege of working with and meeting some truly inspiring individuals over the last 18 years. And I'm happy to say some of whom are here with us tonight. Thank you.
Suzan, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's hear from Eva next. Eva.
Hello, thank you, Elisabeth. My name is Eva Gray and I am an Information Advice and Guidance Officer. I am part of the Welsh Prison Project team and we are based in Cardiff. The Welsh Prison Project was set up as a space for testing out new forms of support. So in my role in Wales, I have offered support to our existing and potential learners and also to the prison staff. I am also one of the PET advice line advisors. I offer a telephone support directly to our learners and also to their families as well as prison staff. I work together with Suzan and Jay. Suzan would help me with any queries relating to funding applications, for example. And Jay supports me, for instance, with creating reports for the Welsh prisons, which is brilliant. So thank you guys. And the reason why I work for PET is that I believe that people have the ability to change and I would like to contribute to that change. In the past, I worked in the prison service. I worked in education department at HMP Cardiff for a number of years. And at the same time, I studied psychology and then continued with a PhD in psychology on motivation to engage in education. So I was thrilled to be able to get a job relating to my experience and also to my academic expertise.
Eva, thank you very much from that. And Jay, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Elisabeth, and good evening, everyone. I'm Jay. I've been working at PET for around 2.5 years now as the implementation officer. Alongside the implementation manager, I was brought in to set up a new database and process for managing applications, as well as reviewing and hopefully improving various other processes within PET, like monitoring and feedback, the advice services, as well as general reporting and data analysis. Beyond implementing new systems and processes, I support staff with their use of the system and produce reports around access to learning, the Welsh project that Eva mentioned, fundraising, and also some policy work. There are two things really that attracted me to PET and that have kind of inspired me during my time here. Firstly, just the really pragmatic approach that PET takes, kind of seeing that education in prisons isn't at the level that it should be. PET steps in and provides it, and I think that's really amazing. The courses that PET offers change people's lives directly when they're in prison in terms of mental health and other benefits, and then directly when someone leaves prison and is looking for work or to continue with their life. Secondly, PET is an organisation that's always looking to improve, both in terms of outcomes for its learners, but also the way that we work internally, making our processes more efficient and effective. It's a really inspiring place to work.
Jay, thank you for that. So you already have a sense of the depth and breadth of experience that our PET staff bring to their role. So let's hear from them in a little bit more detail now. So Suzan, let's start with you. We are all so aware of the impact of the pandemic, both personally and professionally. Tell us what this has meant for PET's service delivery team. Give us a sense of the challenges you faced and how has this affected prison learners?
Thank you, Elisabeth. Well, there were numerous challenges that we faced when the pandemic sent the country into lockdown. Most notably was the lack of communication with our learners and with the prison staff, who are very important in helping PET to identify individuals who are seeking to start or continue their learning journey. The lack of movement around the prison meant that learners who were already studying on a course were unable to seek support on their courses from the education staff or use normal routes for contacting their course tutors. prior to the start of the lockdown, my colleagues and I would, on a regular basis, visit prisons to promote our services, offer support to prison education staff, and hold advice sessions for potential and ongoing learners. The inability to work in this way to reach and communicate with our learners presented us with a very large challenge that we had to very quickly work to resolve. Current and potential learners were unable to leave their cells to visit the education departments. Classes and workshops were suspended due to the pandemic. Then over time, the lack of prison officers to open cell doors and escort prisoners from their wings meant that even a visit to the library was unimaginable. Our learners were very deeply and negatively impacted by the lack of access to the most basic of information and the much needed reassurance that we had not forgotten about them. I'm sure we can all try to imagine how psychologically damaging it can be to be locked away for over 23 hours in an enclosed space without the ability to communicate with others. We quickly understood that our learners' inability to communicate was not limited to just communicating with PET. Our learners found it incredibly difficult to send messages to education staff within their own prisons. This inevitably impacted on their ability to start, continue, or complete their studies. And so the Access to Learning team had to take action. Also, at the height of the pandemic, some of the education staff were working from home for a number of reasons, as you can imagine. And those who were still in the prisons were either not permitted to visit prisoners on their wings to offer support and answer queries, or they were redeployed to give support in other areas of the prison. Even the trusted communication through the art of letter writing was disrupted. We had to work very quickly to find ways of reaching our learners and giving them that much needed support. We were working very hard to reach our contacts in the prisons, requesting updates on the situation in their establishment so that we could gain an understanding of the challenges that were affecting our learners. We are very lucky that education staff in prisons are very dedicated to their work in supporting learners and in working very closely with PET.
Suzan, thank you for that. Let's stick with you because you've articulated the really very sobering challenges and indeed the work you've done to understand these. But what has PET actually done in response?
Well, this part, finding a solution to the challenges we face was in itself challenging, but ultimately this has been incredibly rewarding. And to answer this question, I will break it up into 5 parts. So firstly, we were lucky that although the postal service was heavily disrupted, we were able to continue receiving post from prisons. And we were very fortunate to have staff members who were able to safely access our offices to process incoming as well as outgoing post. We were reduced to receiving postal deliveries twice a week to our office. And so a member of staff would visit the office to open, scan, and send the post to the relevant teams or individuals for processing and responding. On those visits, the lucky staff member would take on the task of receiving our PET replies to be printed and posted out to the prisons. As you can imagine, this is no easy task, and on some days it would be rather challenging, especially if the postal deliveries were large or where we had to complete a mailing to several individuals. The challenge of how we quickly and effectively respond to correspondence from our learners was resolved with the introduction of the Emailer Prisoner Service. Now, this is an amazing service which allows us to write and send an email addressed to any prisoner serving in a prison in England, Wales, the Channel Islands, and the Isle of Man via the Emailer Prisoner website. The email gets delivered to the prison prints it out and delivers it to the individual in their cell like they would any other post. This service also allows for the majority of prisons a reply service at no cost to the individual. All costs are covered by PET. The individual is then able to handwrite a response, which is scanned and emailed back to PET. Introducing this service has been very important and vital to the Access to Learning team in maintaining that communication with our current and potential learners. The service allows us to quickly deal with a query and respond to the individual within a matter of days, where in the past it may have taken anything up to 2 weeks. This has also enabled us to more easily provide support and encouragement to learners to continue studying if they were feeling disheartened as a result of the delays caused by the pandemic. Now, the second solution looks at our communication with the prison staff. We introduced virtual meetings, making use of platforms such as Zoom and Microsoft Teams to help us maintain those relationships with the prisons. This was in addition to regular telephone calls. We held one-to-one meetings with individual prisons, as well as meetings with a cluster of prisons from the same region. This gave us and the prisons an opportunity to share updates about our work, openly discuss ongoing challenges, but also share ideas and good practice. The virtual visits cannot replace physically visiting prisons, but it has allowed us to maintain and strengthen our relationships with the prisons. And in the very near future, we look forward to being able to offer both virtual and physical visits to all prisons. So thirdly, we reviewed and redeveloped our website for prison staff. Prior to the pandemic, we had launched a new section on our website, which is password protected for prison staff. This is an area where prison staff can access our application forms, information on the courses we offer, and the staff handbook. This is a great resource designed to support staff in how they can support individuals in applying to PET. In the absence of the physical prison visits and reduced access to our office to post out information to prison staff, we use this opportunity to strengthen this area of our website. It is now a haven, a one-stop shop of very useful information and resources that prison staff can access, download, and print off for use in their prisons. For staff who are working from home during the pandemic, this became an important place for them to visit to refresh their knowledge on the services we offer at PET and on what is available for current and potential learners. So our fourth response to the challenges we faced, we completed the mammoth task of reviewing all of the courses that we were supporting for learners. This was using feedback from learners, from prison staff, and the expert advice team at PET. We were able to produce and launch our course prospectus, which actually I happen to have on hand. The course prospectus helps potential and current learners explore the wide range of over 120 courses available for study before they can choose the most suitable one for them. And finally, we introduced and launched the PET advice line, which is a free phone number for prisoners to seek personalized advice and guidance from our team about available courses. This service has been greatly welcomed by our learners and those who are new to PET. It is an opportunity for learners to have that direct link to PET. This period has been very challenging, but the final results have been and continue to be deeply rewarding. And just to give you a quick recap, so our 5 responses to the challenges we faced, we had the introduction of email prisoner service, the virtual prison meetings with staff, website development, the launch of our new course prospectus, and finally, the launch of the advice line.
Thank you very much for that, Susan. Let's bring Eva in here. Susan mentioned right at the end there, the advice line, Eva. Tell us more about it. Explain how it works and how does it help prison learners?
Thanks, Elisabeth. As Susan explained, there was an urgent need to have the ability to communicate with our current and potential learners directly and offer support during the lockdown in prisons. Now, firstly, I'll briefly tell you how the advice line works, and secondly, how our advice line has helped prisoner learners during the pandemic. So the advice line is a free line for our callers. We are open 2 days a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the mornings and in the afternoons from 2 to 4. And on Thursdays, it is a late one until 6. We have a break at lunch times as it's time for men and women in prison to have their lunch, and often telephone access is not available then. Our advice line is staffed by us, PT staff. I'm one of the advisors. We are trained and experienced advisors. We work together to provide the best service. We often meet to share case studies and have training to ensure that our skills are up to date and, importantly, consistent. Talking about a consistent approach, it is our paramount that we record all the information on our secure database in order for other advisors to continue support if needed. For instance, we would send a follow-up email, which is the email a prisoner service, which Suzan has mentioned. So this would briefly describe how the advice line works. And now to the second part of the question, which is on how our advice line has helped prisoner learners during the pandemic. I've mentioned that the advice line is a free line for our callers. Any callers or any learners have been able to dial our number and find out an answer to an education-related query in a timely manner, answered by highly trained staff. So prison learners can call us if they wish to talk to us. We may even argue that the advice line provision promotes independence and autonomy in learners as they plan what information or support they need to be successful in their studies. For instance, last Thursday, I received a call from a prospective learner who wanted help with a distance learning course selection. He said that he wanted to do the starting with science, technology and maths, which is an open university access course. He said that the reason why he wanted to do it was that he was interested in science when he was at school. He also said that he had been out of education for more than 20 years and that he had never studied a distance learning course. So I've provided information about the module or the course that he requested, and I've also suggested if he would consider a GCSE's combined science or GCSE's maths. What I've also recommended to him before applying to us was to get in touch with his education department and ask them for one of the PET short courses. And in brief, the PET short courses are contextualized study skills courses, which we put together for learners such as this one, for those who are out of education for a while and who need to brush up on their study skills and also to see what distance learning might be like. In summary, our free advice line provides a direct communication between the learners and PT. The learner is in control of that conversation as they present us with what they need to be supported with, and we respond in a timely manner by an expertly trained staff so that the learners received tailored support which is best suited to fulfill their goals and needs.
Eva, thank you for that. That degree of tailoring has really just come through in what you've said. If I just let you know all as well, is there's some really interesting comments coming through in the chat room function around kind of PET's wider services and people's experience of those. But let's stick with the advice line and let's come to Jay now. Jay, I'd really like to hear from you here around who's actually used the advice line, because Eva's kind of brought it to life in terms of how it works, but who's used it and how do learners hear about it?
Absolutely, thank you, Elisabeth. I have prepared a few slides to help bring this to life a little bit rather than rattle off a load of stats. So I'll share my screen and talk you through them. Bear with.
There you go. I think I can certainly see it, Jay. So if we work on the basis, you're fine to proceed.
Good stuff. Always nice when the tech works, right?
Absolutely.
So hopefully with these slides, I can give you all a sense of the diverse makeup of callers and the kinds of things that we track about the service. When we set up the line in April last year, we really didn't know how this would break down. We knew it would be some mix of people in prison, friends and family, and prison staff, but we weren't sure what the proportions would be. We've now taken almost 2,500 calls since the line opened from 110 different prisons. That's nearly every prison in England, Wales, the Channel Islands, and the Isle of Man. As you can see, 97.5% of the calls have been direct from people in prison, from over 800 individual callers. The callers are a very diverse group. We've taken calls from teenagers through to people in their 70s. Callers may have a short time left to serve, or they may have many years left to serve. They come from a variety of different backgrounds, somewhat in line with the prison population as a whole, as you can see from this chart on the right-hand side. And really, this diversity across these characteristics, but others as well, means that our advice line staff, people like Eva, have to be ready to respond to queries and offer advice to a range of different people that can have very, very different needs. A young caller, for example, with a short sentence or near the end of their sentence, might be interested in courses that will very directly improve their employment prospects, something like a NEBOSH health and safety course, while a caller with a really long remaining sentence might be looking to re-enter education after a long time away, and maybe much less concerned by their immediate employment prospects, instead looking to test their skills or to learn more about a topic that really interests them. So it's a really, really diverse group. And then beyond who our callers are, we track how callers hear about the line so that we can understand the effectiveness of advertising and promotional work that we do. As you can see here, advertising in Inside Time, which for anyone who doesn't know is a monthly newspaper in prisons, is the way that the majority of callers hear about the line. But word of mouth and our results letters also play a big part, as well as the efforts of prison staff putting the word out there, which we're really, really grateful for. It's not represented here, but in the past we've run advertising campaigns on prison radio, and we tracked that. That had quite an impact, making up to, I think, 50% of responses when the campaign was running. And finally, on the advice line, gathering data around who's calling and how they hear about the line helps us to continually improve the service and make sure that we're reaching as many people as we can. As Eva and Suzan have explained, the advice line is a vital service for people in prison and has made a real difference to their lives, particularly during the pandemic, when we haven't been able to do the kind of face-to-face that we would really like to do.
Jay, thank you for that. That breakdown, the breakdown of people who actually use the advice line is really important. So can we go beyond the advice line and let's see what we understand about who is using PET services more broadly? What do we know about? Can you tell us about the people who apply to PET?
Absolutely. I think this is a really interesting question, and one that we're much better able to answer following the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years around our database and our processes. It's something that PET has always looked at, but as I say, in the last couple of years, we've really improved here, and we're able to kind of see that information in real time. Some of the changes that we made to the application process have seen response rates for EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion kind of questions go from around 45% to over 90% now. So we've got a really clear picture actually of who's applying to us and also where we can do better in raising awareness and encouraging different groups to engage. I've got a few more slides that I'll share with you all that kind of show some of the characteristics that we track, and also critically how our stats compare with the prison population as a whole.
Thank you, Jay. I'll let you know when I can see things. So again, I can see things now, so hopefully others can as well. Over to you. Brilliant.
So we track a wide range of characteristics, including age, gender, ethnicity, and a few others, disability as well. And really PET takes applications from a huge range of people, from the youngest kind of at 16 years old to people into their 80s. Applicants come from every prison in England, Wales, the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man. And as I said, perhaps the key thing that we look at when we're reviewing this kind of data is whether or not our applicants, and of course our successful applicants, are representative of the prison population as a whole. While it's not a perfect match, we actually do really well in this kind of comparison, and where there is some discrepancy, we're actively working to correct it. As you can see here in terms of age, in the table on the right hand side, our applicants match up pretty closely with the actual prison population. That said, there is the 30 to 39 age group is slightly overrepresented, and over 60s are underrepresented. So when we see something like that, we've started to look at the needs of older learners more closely so that we can encourage more applications from that group. Moving on, we'll take a look at the gender breakdown of our applicants. So women are overrepresented in our stats, likely due to women's prisons providing a bit more support during lockdown, and some restricted funding that we've had that has made it easier to fund female learners over the last couple of years. The prison service doesn't actually have accurate data around transgender and non-binary people, so we can't really make a useful comparison here, but we feel it's really important to gather this data to inform us about these groups and what their experience is like in prison and with distance learning. Finally, we'll take a look at ethnicity. So in terms of ethnicity, our applicants are a very diverse group, and the overall stats line up quite closely with the prison population. We break it down a bit further than the prison service does. The left-hand chart is kind of our stats, but we've grouped them up. We've grouped up some values so that you can kind of make a useful comparison. When we reviewed this data, we noticed particularly that the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities are underrepresented in our stats. This isn't shown in HMPPS stats, but HMIP, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons, reports that around 5% of the prison population comes from these groups. In our numbers, it's less than 1%. So we've started to reach out to relevant charities and organisations that can hopefully help us to improve here. To summarise, this is a snapshot of the kind of measures that we use to understand who our learners are, and they're really useful to get the big picture. But ultimately, our learners and applicants are all individuals, and the team responds to each person according to their specific needs.
Yeah, Jay, thank you so much for that. It's really important that we talk about diversity. It's really important that we talk about data and information, but you're so right. What about the people? Suzan and Eva, we've already got a sense from you. You are both so well placed to tell us why distance learning matters, and indeed to share some of the stories that come through the application. So let's hear from Eva first. Bring life to this for us, Eva.
Thank you, Elisabeth. If you don't mind, I'll briefly talk about evidence of wider impact of education before talking about the importance of distance learning for our learners. So we understand that there is some evidence from academic literature to suggest that various types of education have beneficial effect. For instance, some studies measure or assess education or educational participation on the reoffending rates or employment rates. However, there's not been much research assessing or measuring the impact of distance learning. Prisoners Education Trust work together with the Ministry of Justice to assess the impact of distance learning in terms of reoffending and employment rates within 12 months after release. And the studies suggested that in comparison to a matched group, those who were funded for distance learning course by PET showed reduced reoffending rates and increased chance of finding employment. And then going back to your question, Elisabeth, about the importance of distance learning for our learners, what I hear from our distance learners is that they talk about better prospects of finding their job. They talk about their hope to stop committing crime. And importantly, they talk about their free choice of doing something that they perhaps always wanted to do. Many learners talk about improved mental health and well-being. They tell us that they enjoy studying, they like learning new things, and they like the challenge of assembling an essay, and they look forward to getting feedback so that they can improve for next time. They talk about distance learning courses giving them purpose to get up in the morning, and that they give them structure to the day. Some of our learners talk about improved confidence and wanting to continue their studies or engage in other activities offered by the prison. We also hear learners talking about improved relationships with their families and children. For instance, in HMP Park, the prison runs a father inside group, and people in this group have the opportunity to help their children with homework. And we heard from one of our learners that both himself and his daughter were completing a GCSE maths. And he talked about that it was wonderful to talk to his daughter and share something that they had in common, which in turn improved their relationship overall. So in summary, we hear that distance learning is important to our learners, as they shared with us their hopes and thoughts regarding their studies with PET. They felt that the distance learning helps them with giving them purpose and directions, and that distance learning makes better job prospects. Importantly, our learners felt that distance learning had a positive impact on their mental health and well-being, and also improved their relationship with family.
Thank you. Eva, thank you for that. Suzan, I'm guessing that really resonates with your experiences and what you hear as well, but anything you want to add to that?
No, indeed. I mean, thank you, Eva, you've given us such an in-depth answer that I thought it would be useful to share a few words from our current learners, since it's not possible for them to be with us here tonight. So one of our learners, Andre, he wrote to us and said, "Thank you so much for believing in me when others have not, for giving me the opportunity to prove myself and help turn my life around, as well as the chance to make my family proud of me for once." Now, Andre is not a new learner to PET. We have funded him for a few courses to support him on his learning journey. The recent course that we supported him for was for a NEBOSH diploma. Now, this is the industry recognized qualification for individuals who are seeking employment within the health and safety industry. In his application to us, Andre talked about how by completing this qualification, it would open the door to meaningful employment for him on release. PET has previously supported him to complete the certificate qualification, and this new course will help him work towards that goal of gaining meaningful employment on release. And I would like to add that while studying, Andre is also an education mentor in the prison, and he supports others who are at the beginning of their learning journeys. And this is because he's keen to share his learned knowledge with others. And he does this with the full support of the education department, which is fantastic. Now, another of our learners is Melissa. Now, Melissa has held a lifelong dream of working with animals, more specifically dogs. And Melissa applied to PET because she wanted something that would help give her focus and a sense of achievement, but also something that could lead to an employment and release in an area that she is passionate about. Now, Melissa left school at the age of 15 with no qualifications, and the life she found herself in did not allow her the time for studying, and she had a very strong fear of taking exams. So in prison, Melissa has found her second chance, and she writes, "During my course, I found that I have a brain. During my first 36 years of life, I have always been told I would never achieve anything. I am so proud of myself." So when I was thinking about tonight, I came across this piece of feedback that was sent to us, and I really wanted to share it with you tonight. And it's from a prison staff member, and they said to us, "When I started, I needed a lot of help as I had very little understanding of PT and distance learning. And you were always more than ready to help. You were extremely supportive during the lockdown. The good results have surely helped us with the prison service and Ofsted inspection." I think that is just absolutely fantastic. And so finally, I will tell you about one more of our learners, and Abdul. Now, Abdul studies classical music, and he came to us seeking help to study a language course that will help to give him greater understanding and appreciation of the music. And Abdul wrote to us after receiving his course from PET. And he says, "It was during the recent pandemic lockdown. I was locked up for 23.5 hours a day when I was approached by a member of staff who gave me a PET prospectus. I applied for the German course, and a few weeks later, I learned that you had kindly funded me for this course. So far, the course is going well, but learning a new language takes time, so this will be a long-term project, but I'm progressing well. I would like to say how important your charity is, as many people in prison have little or no recourse to funds. When I am released from prison, I will continue to learn German, and I would never forget your kindness in choosing and deciding to fund my course. For me, the course has made a big difference to my time in prison. I will and have recommended PET to others around me. I hold PET in high esteem." I cannot say very much after such words from our learners, Abdul, Melissa, and Andre.
Thank you. Suzan, Eva, thank you so much. You've left us in no doubt about the impact of PET in individuals. Just to Jay and Eva, I want to kind of come back to you for just a couple more themes to explore, but we are up against it sort of time-wise, so if I could just sort of flag that to you. Jay, we've talked about the impact on individuals, and indeed Eva referred to the joint research with the MOJ there, because there's something quite fundamental there, isn't there, about PET understanding its impact more broadly. You know, how do we evaluate and monitor our outcomes, and how do we use that learning to then improve our distance learning provision? How do we close that loop?
No, absolutely. I think, as I said at the start of this is something that's super important and something that I find particularly important. There's really two sides to this. The work that we do to monitor learners' progress, that kind of internally we refer to as monitoring and feedback, and the bigger picture work that we do to monitor the service as a whole, and kind of particularly the access to learning service. On the monitoring and feedback side of things, there are a few methods that we use to collect information to monitor and improve our provision. When a learner starts a course, we send them a start of course survey to complete. And this helps us to understand their motivations and how they're feeling at the kind of the early stage of the process. And we're interested in things like how confident they're feeling about the course and engaging with education generally, how they feel about their employment prospects, and also how positive or otherwise they're feeling about life after release and contributing to society, etc. Along with the application form itself that they've submitted, this start of course survey gives us a kind of baseline reading of how someone is feeling before a course. And then to understand the kind of the impacts of our work and the experience that a learner has while they're studying, we send our learners an end of course survey around 6 to 9 months after they've received their course. This helps us to understand the quality of the courses, the suitability for study within prison, and the support available within specific prisons. And kind of most importantly, how someone feels after they've studied a course, asking some of the same questions from the start of course survey again, so we can kind of understand their progression. In addition to the feedback that we collect directly from learners, we also collect data from prison staff and from course suppliers, so that we know when a learner finishes their course or if they get stuck, so that we can help them or find them something more suitable to study. So that's the kind of monitoring and feedback side of things, the kind of direct from and with a learner. And then, as I said, there's also systems in place to monitor the bigger picture around our services, particularly in light of the broad changes that we've made over the last couple of years. This is embodied in the Quality Assurance Panel, which is a subcommittee of the Board of Trustees, which looks at the overall picture. They're interested in things like, and this is not an exhaustive list, but things like the overall success rates, kind of, as I say, overall, but also at individual prisons, the reasons why some applicants are unsuccessful, how much information, advice and guidance applicants are receiving before applying, both from PET itself, but also from other sources as well. And whether or not unsuccessful applicants are reapplying if they've been unsuccessful, or if they've been kind of put off from the process, which is a really important one, I think. Looking at this kind of information helps us to understand where people are struggling, both in terms of applications, but also kind of the courses, and allows us to produce guidance that will help applicants and prison staff. To give some examples, the information that we've mentioned fed into the prospectus, which has been mentioned this evening, as well as guidance that we produce for prison staff to support learners through the application process. We also use this data and review process to make tweaks to the application form and the guidance that we give PET staff when they're scoring applications. This kind of helps us.
I'm going to bring you to a close if I may there. Let me, forgive me, I've interrupted your sentence. So do finish what you were saying, but if I could just kind of flag up to you as well, just because we're up against it time-wise, but you gave us some really useful examples there of that kind of closing the loop, feeding things back in, raising standards. Let me ask you to finish.
No worries at all. So yeah, so that allows us to kind of make those tweaks, and that's about ensuring that the process is robust, but that it's as accessible to as many people as it can be.
Jay, thank you so much for that. As I feared, time is up against us a little bit. I do want to finish by coming back to Eva, but if I could say to you, Eva, we've literally got kind of 2 minutes for me to come back to you. We're not going to have the chance to bring in some of the questions from the chat room function, but I am so pleased that a conversation has been going on within that chat room. There is a real desire for more information, PET colleagues, so I think we need to be reassuring colleagues that where they're asking points as part of the chat room, there will be the opportunity to get back to people on an individual basis, because people are really interested in what the 4 of you are saying. Some people absolutely have experience of it and they're kind of reiterating the strength of what you do, but others are finding out things for the first time tonight and they want to know more. So let's kind of make sure we do that. Eva, I do want to put this final question back to you, because understandably tonight we focused on the last 18 months or so. But I want to make sure we also look to the future, recognising, and we've had questions in the chat room function around this, that there's real concern around the new variants and the impact that will have on the lockdown status of prisons. But nonetheless, if we think about life beyond the pandemic, will the advice line continue to play an important role? Give us a sense of what the future looks like. But as I say, in literally 2 minutes, forgive me.
Thanks, Elisabeth. There are 4 reasons why I think the advice line will continue to play an important role beyond lockdown. The first one is providing a free line to our learners allows direct access to information, advice and guidance with regards to distance learning with PET. So our service is quick and provided by expertly trained staff, and therefore our learners need to access our service, our advice line to progress well with their studies. Second, the lockdown during COVID accelerated the launch of the advice line to make direct contact with us possible for the learners. It would be good to think that COVID-related lockdowns will not be reoccurring, but it is good to plan for them and have effective provision in place. Lockdowns in prisons do not only happen due to COVID outbreaks. Within the prison service, short-term lockdowns have been happening relatively frequently. For instance, the staff shortages or dealing with an incident or a shut education department may be some of the reasons why it is not possible for a learner to receive information and support from us. However, with the advice line in place, learners will have a choice to contact us and receive information they require. Third, we heard earlier about what learners felt and thought about studying with us. They talked about employment plans, crime-free lives, and improved mental health and family relationships. We would like to help those learners achieve their goals and aspirations. Therefore, by having our advice line in place in the future, we are in a much better position to support our learners. And last point that I would like to make is that our learners are in the center of everything that we do, and we want our learners to be successful learners. The advice line allows our learners to be independent learners in that they make a decision about what they would like to do regarding their distance learning studies. And once we know, we will then be able to do our utmost to support them in getting closer to their goals.
Thank you. Eva, thank you so much. That's really come throughout so much of what you've said tonight. As I feared, all my kind of health warning at the beginning, time has beaten us, because we could spend so much time, couldn't we, kind of hearing from colleagues. But let me just bring things to a close, because it's so important that people have the opportunity to move on and go and do what they need to do now. So let me just finish with some thanks. Firstly, to Susan, Eva and Jay. It's not as easy as you might think, is it, talking about what you do on a daily basis, and indeed what you know incredibly well. But we're incredibly grateful for the knowledge, the insight, the detail that you've brought tonight. And thank you so much for taking the time to share that insight with us. To our invisible audience, can I thank you for your time and also for your support? This has been such an insightful and informative evening, not just because of what Susan, Jay and Eva have shared, but because of what you've been prepared to share through the chat room functions. And as I say, that conversation that's been taking on outside. So thank you so very much indeed for that. Can I thank you all as well in advance for your support, because as I mentioned earlier, this week we are taking part in the Big Give Christmas Challenge, where donations made to PET through the Big Give website will be doubled. So if I just remind you that the donations that you may be able to pledge this year will go to supporting the work that Susan, that Jay and Eva have brought such life to tonight. That's about our advice line and our learning courses and support. So thank you all so very much. As I say, it's been an incredibly useful, it's been a thought-provoking evening. I hope you've learned something new. I know that colleagues will be following up with the individual comments that have been made via the chat room function, so I can absolutely reassure you that that will be taking place. But thank you all very much indeed. As I say, thanks to Eva, Jay and Susan. Thanks to all. Take care and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.